You see a formation of American bombers cutting through the hostile skies over Nazi-occupied Europe, and trailing behind them, like guardian angels painted in red, are the fighter planes of the 332nd Fighter Group. And what makes this moment extraordinary isn't just the mission itself, but the fact that these pilots, these warriors of the sky, are about to achieve something that will become legendary in military aviation history, something that will force America to confront its own prejudices, even as it fights fascism abroad, because these men, the Tuskegee Airmen, are Black Americans fighting a war on two fronts, one against the Nazis in the air and another against racism at home. And on this day, March 24, 1945, they're about to escort bombers on a mission so deep into enemy territory that other fighter groups have refused it, and by the time the sun sets, they will have written a page in history that challenges everything America believed about race and capability. Imagine you're a white bomber crew member in 1945. You've heard the stories, you've been told your whole life that Black men lack the intelligence, the courage, the mental capacity to fly complex machinery, to make split-second decisions under pressure, to be trusted with your life, and yet here you are 30,000 feet above Germany, and the only thing standing between you and the Luftwaffe's deadliest fighters are pilots with brown skin and red-tailed planes, and you're about to witness something that will shatter every racist assumption you've ever held. The story begins years earlier, in 1941, when the United States military is still segregated, when Black soldiers are relegated to menial labor, when the idea of a Black pilot is considered not just unlikely but impossible by military leadership. And into this environment steps the Tuskegee experiment. Not an experiment in aviation, but an experiment in proving or disproving white supremacist ideology. Because the Army Air Corps doesn't create this program out of progressive ideals but out of political pressure from civil rights organizations and Black newspapers demanding that African Americans be given the chance to serve their country as pilots. The military establishment expects them to fail, actually wants them to fail, because failure will justify continued segregation, will prove what they've always claimed about racial inferiority. And so they stack the deck, they create obstacles that no white pilot training program faces, they assign instructors who are openly hostile, they provide inferior equipment, they establish standards that are higher than those required of white cadets, and they wait for the inevitable collapse that will confirm their prejudices. But something unexpected happens at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama, something that the architects of failure never anticipated, because these men, these Black Americans who have faced discrimination every day of their lives, who have been told since childhood that they are less than, that they are incapable, that they should accept their place at the bottom of society, these men refuse to fail, they refuse to give racism the satisfaction of their defeat, and they begin to excel not just adequately but extraordinarily, posting training scores that match and often exceed those of white pilot programs. You need to understand what it means to train as a Black pilot in 1940s Alabama. You're learning to fly in the heart of the Jim Crow South. You cannot eat in the same restaurants as white pilots. You cannot drink from the same water fountains. You must enter buildings through separate doors marked colored. And yet you're expected to master the same aircraft, the same combat tactics, the same navigation skills as your white counterparts, all while knowing that the military is documenting your every mistake, waiting for evidence to shut down the program, and still they persist, still they train, still they push themselves beyond every limit because they know they're not just fighting for themselves but for every Black American who will come after them. The first class of Tuskegee pilots graduates in March 1942, and among them is Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who will later become the first Black general in the United States Air Force. But in 1942, he's just a captain leading men into a military that doesn't want them. And when the 99th Fighter Squadron deploys to North Africa and then to Italy, they face not just enemy fire but friendly skepticism, because white bomber crews request not to be escorted by Black pilots, because white ground crews sabotage their aircraft, because white commanders write reports questioning their courage and effectiveness even when the facts say otherwise. There's a moment in 1943 when the entire Tuskegee experiment nearly ends, when a report circulates claiming that the 99th Fighter Squadron is underperforming, that Black pilots lack the aggressive instinct necessary for combat, and this report, written by officers who have never flown with them, who have never witnessed their performance firsthand, threatens to ground every black pilot in the military. But then something remarkable happens. The statistics tell a different story. The actual combat records show that the 99th has performed as well as or better than comparable white squadrons, and the report is quietly shelved. But the damage is done. The Tuskegee Airmen know that they're being judged by standards that don't apply to anyone else, that every mission is a test, that failure is not an option. By 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group has been formed, combining the 99th with 3 other black squadrons, and they're flying P-51 Mustangs painted with distinctive red tails. And these red tails become a symbol, they become a promise, because something extraordinary starts happening in the skies over Europe. Bomber crews who initially didn't want black escorts start specifically requesting the red tails. They start passing the word through the bomber groups that if you want to make it home, if you want the best chance of survival, you want those red-tailed fighters on your wing. And the reason is simple and devastating to racist ideology. The Tuskegee Airmen are not losing bombers. You have to understand how unusual this is, how unprecedented, because bomber escort duty in World War II is brutal. Fighters are supposed to engage enemy aircraft, they're supposed to pursue kills, they're supposed to rack up individual victories. And in doing so, they often leave bombers vulnerable, they chase glory and individual achievement, and bombers get shot down. This is accepted as the cost of air combat. But the Tuskegee Airmen adopt a different philosophy. They stick with the bombers. They prioritize protection over personal glory. They fly close escort even when it means passing up opportunities for kills. And the result is that bombers escorted by the Red Tails have the lowest loss rate of any fighter group in the entire European theater. The mission on March 24, 1945 is to Berlin, the heart of Nazi Germany, a mission of over 1,600 miles round trip, the longest escort mission ever flown by the 15th Air Force. And it's dangerous not just because of distance, but because Berlin is defended by the most experienced Luftwaffe pilots remaining, by the most concentrated anti-aircraft defenses in Europe. And the bomber crews know that this is a mission where losses are expected, where the odds of making it home intact are slim, but they also know they have the Red Tails as escorts, and that gives them hope. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. leads the mission, and under his command are 72 P-51 Mustangs flown by the best pilots the Tuskegee program has produced, men like Lee Archer, who will end the war as one of the top black aces, men like Charles McGee, who will fly 409 combat missions across 3 wars, men like Roscoe Brown, who will shoot down one of Nazi Germany's advanced jet fighters this very day. And as they take off from their base in Italy, they know that every eye in the military is watching, that this mission will either cement their legacy or be used as evidence against them, and failure, as always, is not an option. The flight to Berlin takes hours of maintaining formation, of scanning skies for enemy fighters, of managing fuel consumption, and when they reach the target area, the Luftwaffe is waiting, waves of German fighters diving from above, trying to break through to the bombers, and this is where the Red Tails show what they're made of. They engage the enemy with precision and ferocity. They turn their P-51s into barriers between the bombers and the attackers, and the sky fills with the chaos of aerial combat, tracer rounds cutting through clouds, aircraft spinning toward Earth trailing smoke. But through it all, the Red Tails maintain their discipline. They do not abandon the bombers to chase individual kills. They do not let glory distract them from their mission. Roscoe Brown spots a German Me-262, one of the world's first operational jet fighters, a plane that is faster than anything the Allies have, that should be untouchable by propeller-driven aircraft, and he does what seems impossible. He anticipates its flight path, he leads his target perfectly, and he shoots it down, and this moment, this impossible victory, becomes symbolic of everything the Tuskegee Airmen represent, because they're not just competing on equal terms, they're exceeding expectations. They're achieving things that the so-called superior race cannot match. The bombers complete their mission over Berlin, they drop their payload on the target, and then comes the long flight home, and this is where escort missions often fall apart, because damaged bombers struggle to keep up, because fuel runs low, because exhausted pilots make mistakes. But the Red Tails stay with them, every single bomber. They adjust their speed to match struggling aircraft. They position themselves to ward off any enemy fighters who might prey on stragglers. And as the formation finally crosses back into friendly airspace, the bomber crews begin to realize something extraordinary. They count their numbers and discover that not a single bomber has been lost. Not one. And this isn't luck, this isn't chance. This is the result of skill and dedication and a level of professionalism that racist ideology claimed black men could never achieve. When the mission reports are filed, when the statistics are compiled, the achievement becomes undeniable. The Tuskegee Airmen have escorted bombers on the longest mission in 15th Air Force history. They have engaged and defeated advanced enemy fighters including jets. They have protected every single bomber under their care. And they have done this while facing discrimination, while living in segregated quarters, while being paid less than white pilots of equivalent rank, while knowing that when they return to America they will still be subject to Jim Crow laws, still be denied service at restaurants, still be forced to the back of buses, and yet they have performed flawlessly. The legend grows from here, the myth of the Red Tails never losing a bomber, and while historians will later note that across their entire combat record they did lose some bombers, the fact remains that their loss rate was dramatically lower than any other fighter group, that bomber crews genuinely did request them specifically, that their performance was objectively superior, and the question becomes why. Why did black pilots succeed where the military establishment expected them to fail? And the answer is both simple and profound. They succeeded because the premise of their inferiority was always a lie, because racism was never based on reality but on the need to justify oppression. And when given equal opportunity, black Americans excelled not because they were superhuman but because they were simply human, as capable as anyone else when not held back by systematic discrimination. But here's what makes this story even more powerful, even more important to remember. These men return home as heroes. They've proven themselves in the most decisive way possible. They've saved lives. They've defeated America's enemies. They've embodied the very ideals of courage and excellence that the nation claims to value. And yet they come home to a country that still treats them as second-class citizens. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. returns from the war and cannot eat in restaurants near his base. Charles McGee faces discrimination trying to buy a house. Roscoe Brown is denied opportunities available to white veterans, and the cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable for many white Americans. How do you thank a man for saving your life while denying him basic human rights? How do you celebrate black pilots as heroes while maintaining their inferior? And slowly, painfully, these contradictions begin to erode the foundations of segregation. The Tuskegee Airmen don't end racism, let's be clear about that. They don't fly a few missions and suddenly America becomes post-racial. But they do something equally important. They destroy the intellectual justification for discrimination. They prove beyond doubt that black Americans can perform any task, master any skill, excel in any field when given the opportunity. And this proof becomes ammunition for the civil rights movement, becomes evidence that cannot be dismissed, becomes a crack in the wall of segregation that will eventually bring the whole structure down. In 1948, just 3 years after that perfect mission to Berlin, President Truman signs Executive Order 9981, desegregating the United States military, and while many factors contribute to this decision, the performance of the Tuskegee Airmen is cited explicitly as evidence that segregation weakens rather than strengthens military effectiveness. And suddenly the experiment designed to prove black inferiority has become the catalyst for integration, and the men who were supposed to fail have changed the course of American history. You need to understand what it means that these pilots never lost a single bomber on that March day in 1945. It means that 72 black men, facing discrimination at every level, fighting a war on two fronts, carried the weight of an entire race's reputation on their shoulders and did not falter. It means that when white bomber crews radioed for help, when they were under attack and facing death, they trusted black pilots with their lives, and that trust was honored absolutely. It means that in the most pressure-filled circumstances imaginable, when failure would have justified decades of continued oppression, these men performed perfectly, and that perfection was not a fluke but the result of extraordinary skill, training, and dedication. Today, when you see black pilots flying commercial aircraft, when you see black astronauts commanding space missions, when you see black Americans in every field of aviation and aerospace, you're seeing the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. You're seeing the fruit of seeds planted when 72 men flew to Berlin and back without losing a single bomber. And yet how many Americans know this story? How many history classes teach the detailed account of the Red Tails? How many textbooks give more than a paragraph to the men who prove that excellence has no color? And this erasure, this minimizing of black achievement, is itself a form of ongoing racism. Because if we don't know these stories, if we don't teach these histories, then each generation must prove itself anew, must fight the same battles, must overcome the same prejudices as if the victories of the past never happened. The Tuskegee Airmen matter not just as a feel-good story of overcoming adversity, but as evidence of a fundamental truth that racism has always tried to obscure, that Black Americans have always been as capable, as intelligent, as courageous as any other Americans, and what has held them back is not inherent limitation but systematic oppression. And when that oppression is removed or overcome, Black excellence emerges naturally, not as an exception but as an expectation. Remember that mission to Berlin, remember those 72 pilots. Remember that not a single bomber was lost. Remember that Black men saved white lives while white America still denied them basic rights. Remember that excellence persisted in the face of hatred, that professionalism overcame prejudice, that skill defeated racism's lies, and remember that this is not ancient history, that some of these pilots lived into the 21st century, that the last Tuskegee Airman, Charles McGee, died in 2022 at age 102, having lived long enough to see a Black president, to see Black generals, to see the Air Force finally acknowledge what bomber crews knew in 1945, that the Red Tails were the best escorts in the sky. This is the story of the night Black pilots escorted bombers without losing one. But it's really the story of what happens when talent meets opportunity, when courage faces injustice, when excellence refuses to be denied. And the lesson is not that Black Americans are superhuman, but that they have always been fully human, deserving of every opportunity, capable of every achievement, and worthy of every recognition. And the fact that 72 Black pilots had to perform perfectly to be seen as merely equal tells you everything you need to know about the racism they faced. But the fact that they did perform perfectly, that they saved every bomber, that they came home victorious, tells you everything you need to know about the indomitable spirit of Black Americans who have always fought for their place in a country that was built on their labor but tried to deny them their dignity. And this story, this perfect mission, this impossible achievement, needs to be told and retold until every American knows it, until it becomes as familiar as D-Day or Pearl Harbor, until the names Benjamin O. Davis Jr., Lee Archer, Charles McGee, and Roscoe Brown are spoken with the same reverence as Patton and Eisenhower because they earned it, they paid for it in blood and courage and skill, and we owe them the debt of remembrance, the honor of truth, and the commitment to share their story with everyone who will listen, because this is American history, this is Black history, this is the story of the night the Red Tails flew to Berlin and brought every bomber home.